he keeps on giving us chances for some reason. I don't know why.
Maybe
Maybe
we're
he
like
just likes toying with us. We're the Sims.
we're the Sims, or maybe we're like we were just like in a toxic relationship, and even though God knows he's better off without us, he keeps on giving us a chance, but still, beats us and kills us every now and then.
Yeah.
So, Doctor's Assistant, it's so good to have you back on the channel. Faithful viewers might remember your cameo appearance in my animated Bible Tales of Indoctrination live stream from earlier this year. And I really wanted to have you back on the channel because you're someone who grew up Christian. You are now agnostic. And, well, basically, I just watched The Passion of the Christ for the first time. And we've been talking about it a lot. I asked you, can you watch Passion of the Christ too? Because I really just want to, I don't know, just explore this movie.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. I really appreciate that you watched it. And you don't actually know the story of why I wanted to watch The Passion of the Christ, do you?
I do not.
So basically what happened was, as you may be very well aware, I play soccer with a bunch of people in my neighborhood, and one of them's a Catholic, and he just started insisting that we just meet up and talk one day. And so he knows I'm an atheist. He doesn't know that I have this channel that I'm anonymously doing, something I don't really talk about much with people I don't know very well. For many reasons. I thought like, oh, why is he asking to meet me? Like I was wondering, like, is he going to try to convert me or something? I just wasn't sure. He made a weird joke one time about me being lost, and yeah, a little bit awkward. I figured, okay, he's a nice guy, so we had dinner at a Thai restaurant. Food's really good at that restaurant, and sure enough, the subject came to religion. He told me he was Catholic, and he told me how he believed that there has to be a God. And then he asked me what I believe. And I gave him like the long story short version of my religious upbringing. I grew up Muslim. I kind of just lost faith around when I was 17, 18, and I haven't really been interested in a God or faith since. And he said, oh, interesting. And he asked me, am I interested in knowing the truth? And I said, well, I do like learning things. I don't know what you mean by the truth, though. I don't know. From there, the subject kind of just came to the Passion of the Christ. And he asked me, have you ever seen the Passion of the Christ? And I hadn't at that point. So I grew up in the Middle East, but the Passion of the Christ was actually something that was playing in theaters in the United Arab Emirates where I was growing up. And my parents went to see it. I was 14 at the time, and they wouldn't allow me to go with them to see it.
That would be a lot to see
As a 14-year-old?
In a movie theater at that size, just surrounded by
surround sound.
Yeah. That would be intense.
Screen. Well, so they came back later that night, and I asked them, like, how was it? And they basically said, oh, it's just gratuitous violence. They didn't really seem to think much of it. But anyway, so I just never really was interested in seeing it. Have you ever seen the South Park episode that makes fun of the Passion of the Christ?
I have not.
Okay, so I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but I thought it was pretty funny when I was, the 15-year-old me thought it was pretty funny. I think the episode was called Passion of the Jew, and basically there's two things going on in it. Cartman, who's anti-Semitic, loves the movie, and basically when Kyle, who's the Jewish character, sees it, he starts thinking, oh my god, like maybe the Jewish people are really bad. Look what they did to Jesus. And the other subplot is that Stan and Kenny watch the movie, and they basically get pissed off. Like they say, well, this is just a snuff film, and they try to go to Mel Gibson's house to demand their money back, and they discover that Mel Gibson is a poop-flinging maniac. And mind you, this is before that whole thing happened where he was arrested being drunk and saying things like the Jews are responsible for all the suffering in the world, or whatever it was he said.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why Mel Gibson kind of disappeared from Hollywood for quite a while, but he made it back in.
Makes sense.
Uh, yeah, which just goes to show you can do the most horrible thing, and you'll be back in Hollywood if you just give it enough time.
Absolutely.
Roman Polanski cough. Uh, so that was my experience of it. Never really got around to watching it. I thought, okay, this is just like a movie that's like really violent. And so when this Catholic friend asked me to see it, I thought, you know what? Why the hell not? Let's do it. I'm a big movie buff anyway. And before we get to my viewing experience of The Passion of the Christ, curious to know your perspective on it. Was The Passion of the Christ something that you watched as a kid?
I believe it was. I do have a memory of my mom watching it, but I think that I wasn't allowed to watch all of it. Like, I think that I was maybe going in and out of the room a couple of times, and I saw specific things. So I do have a vague memory of some of the things, but when did it come out?
So it came out in 2004. How old would you have been?
I would have been 7.
7. Okay.
So I could see why she would not want a 7-year-old watching that.
Now that you've rewatched it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that I just came in, saw some awful things, and then left the room. But I think that because of the level of violence that was in it, she didn't really push me to watch it when I was a bit older. Like, we had other religious material to watch instead, kind of thing. Such as VeggieTales.
Such as VeggieTales, of course. The much beloved VeggieTales. Yeah, and the film basically just kind of covers the last day of his life, essentially. Last day of Jesus' life.
From the day where he is praying in the woods on.
It kind of ends with him being resurrected. That was my impression, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, very familiar story with a lot of Christians. You were baptized as a Lutheran, then you were in the United Church, and then you became a Baptist. Do you think it might be a little bit of a thing that might be more important for Catholics compared to other denominations?
I would say yes, because in high school I was in a Catholic high school, and we would every Easter go to the chapel. We would go to the chapel.
Took a while for you to remember that word.
Yeah.
Probably been a while since you've been in one of those.
It has been. So we would go to the chapel, and the Stations of the Cross were spread out throughout the room, and we would go and follow each Station of the Cross.
What does that mean? I don't know.
Oh, do you not know the Stations of the Cross? So that's the walk that Jesus is doing after he's been beaten, and he has the cross that he's carrying. So the first cross is cross. The second one or something is the first time he stumbles. Then there's where the guy has to carry the cross for him. He stumbles again. He gets his face wiped by that lady. He gets crucified. He dies. Like, those are all Stations of the Cross. I believe that there's 13 or 14 of them. So that's why in the movie they were kind of significantly done, and it kind of felt slower at some scenes.
And yeah, just for me in the Middle East at the time, even though, Muslim world, Muslim majority country, I was very well aware that Passion of the Christ was this big phenomenon. I mean, it made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and it really felt like everyone was talking about it just in pop culture and stuff. You'd see it being made fun of in South Park and all kinds of references. And I was aware also that there was kind of, let's say, a disagreement within the Christian community about the movie, because some Christians felt that it was too violent, too gratuitous, too morbid almost. I don't think it was the most popular movie with film critics either. And then there were, of course, like the Christians who really thought that, wow, this is something that's sending the power of Jesus' message and Jesus' sacrifice to the world. So they saw it as this amazing thing. Like,
Hi. Nice.
brief cat intermission going on
It's
here.
a baby.
So cut to me alone in my living room. I'm settling down to watch Passion of the Christ, and I have to be honest, I try to go into it with a completely unbiased mind, but I was, expecting violence, gore, and I was expecting it to maybe be a bit preachy. I think that was my initial expectation as well. And oh boy, Passion of the Christ is one of the most unrelentingly violent movies I've ever seen. You kind of just bombarded with it for almost the entirety of the movie. And so I was familiar with the basics of the story. Judas betrays Jesus for some pieces of silver, and then it begins. and what I didn't realize, and I mean, I'm not sure how accurate this is to what the biblical account is, I didn't realize that the Jewish community hated him so much, that the Jewish religious leaders in the community really hated him and were insistent upon him being crucified. And I didn't realize it was like this thing that what the Romans were in charge of. Like, they could only crucify Jesus if the Romans allowed it.
Mm-hmm. Do you know why they hated him so much?
So, okay, this is based on my viewing experience. The way it's presented was they hated him out of fear and ignorance, and I'm assuming that the religious leaders were threatened that their positions of power would be taken away by this new guy, essentially.
Basically, it comes down to money. They charged a lot of money to get into the temple, to get into God's good graces. And he was mad at that. At one point, Jesus goes into the temple and he flips like all of the tables because he just calls them thieves because they're stealing money in God's house. So they were very mad at that, and they did not want him around.
The way it's presented is like the Romans didn't really want to kill Jesus, but they felt like they just had to because of all the uproar the Jewish people were causing. So with the way that that's presented, I mean, I've heard all sorts of things about how a lot of anti-Semitism is rooted in Christianity and, the crucifixion of Jesus. And I also know that Mel Gibson has been accused of anti-Semitism because of this movie. What do you think about that?
I can see how people would think that. I personally didn't think that. In the movie, of course, they're going to depict the Jewish people as the bad people, but that's also only a sample of the people. One of the Stations of the Cross is the women wailing, and wailing because they don't want Jesus to die. So yes, a certain portion of the Jewish people really wanted him dead, but there was also a portion of them that really didn't want him to die.
So to kind of just summarize the movie, and it's kind of easy to summarize it, there are some flashbacks here and there of things before the last day of his life. I think there's like a scene with him and his mother having this moment together where he's doing some carpentry stuff, and a couple other things like that, where you just, the best hits or highlights of Jesus.
Yeah, him saving Mary Magdalene and such.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But then, you just see him being beaten and tortured by Roman soldiers to within a brink of dying. At first, what's his name, Pontius Pilate.
Pontius Pilate is how I always heard it said.
He didn't want Jesus killed, but he just wanted him, beaten to, within an inch of his life. But then he kind of just caved, said, okay, fine, just crucify him. So Jesus is taken through all those stations, as you mentioned, and ends up on the cross and all that. and he eventually dies. And I think there were two main things that the movie really conveyed to me, speaking as someone who's not someone who grew up Christian. One thing is the incredible suffering that Jesus went through and how he just accepted all that suffering. And there's this moment when I think he regrows like a soldier's ear, one of the soldiers who tried to capture him in the beginning of the movie. So you also see him just being very humble and gracious and kind, even to the people who are doing all these horrible things to him. So that's one thing. The other thing you see is how all of these people just basically failed for all kinds of various reasons, like greed. There's that really weird sequence where Judas is chased by these demon children.
Yeah, I think that was an embellishment. I don't remember demon children chasing him.
That was one of the more entertaining parts of the movie. The demon children bullying him.
And then his death scene, that was...
Where he just abruptly hangs himself?
Yeah, after really zooming in on a donkey corpse.
Yeah, that was weird. Okay, yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, so we see people betraying him or failing Jesus out of greed, cowardice, shame, all kinds of cowardice, actually. Cowardice to do the right thing, cowardice to stand up against a mob. And I guess the takeaway from it then as a viewer is, look at all these amazing things that Jesus did, and he did it for you, and yet look at us. Did we even deserve it? Have we deserved what Jesus did for us? So
that's the exact message you were supposed to take away from that.
Yeah, like I well, that's the thing. Like the whole thing felt like one big guilt trip.
Yes.
And so there's another thing my Catholic friend told me. He told me that his father keeps a DVD of the Passion of the Christ on his coffee table, and he never dares to move it. Like it's always just there, sitting there. And I thought that was so interesting because it's almost like the movie, and by extension just like the death of Jesus, is a kind of like this constant reminder of, you should be grateful. Look what Jesus did. Look what he did for you, and you can never forget it because of what an awful person you are, essentially, or all the awful things you've done and that you're capable of, if you want to be a bit more nice.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Christianity is just a guilt trip, as well as with many other religions. It's like any cult.
Like any cult.
It has its way of keeping you in. Not only are you guilty at the fact that Jesus died for you, you also have the threat of hell looming over you. So you better just be a good Christian, or else life's going to be pretty shitty for you after you die.
Yeah, and I guess the violence in the movie, I mean, you see Jesus go through every kind of imaginable suffering, and they really emphasize the different parts of the suffering, like when he gets the nails driven into him, or when he's lashed and stuff. I guess the point of it is that, I mean, if you're squeamish about violence, then the movie will definitely impact you, just not necessarily religiously, but I guess the point is that the violence sticks with you, and you remember that, oh, I have to be a good person. So like we all have this taint of the original sin that's coming from, what Adam and Eve did. Yeah. Eating from the tree of knowledge. So all this is just a reminder. We all sin, and thus we must be ever so grateful to Jesus/God for the suffering he was willing to go through for us.
Or else we're a bad person.
Yeah. So this is kind of where I'm stuck with this movie, because, and this is what I told my Catholic friend, is I didn't really feel like it impacted me much, again, as a desensitized to violence person who grew up, with GTA and seeing all sorts of action movies and horror movies.
But I don't think that you were the target audience. I think that the target audience was already Christians, because I would say that even like me, it hit me pretty hard because I grew up in this. I knew the story. It has, I guess, in a way, nostalgia for me. So to watch the violence that happened to someone who we call our Lord and Savior, it was intense. It just felt really raw. It made me feel super emotionally invested and uncomfortable for the entire time when he's like getting whipped and you can see his ribs at one point, it looked like. He yank out his arm to reach the cross on the other side to nail his hand in. When they flip him over on the cross, you just wince so much at that pain. That's why I think that it's more so to drive the point home to current Christians of how awful everything was for him, how much he deserves your love and devotion, basically.
Well, that's the thing that I guess did stick with me, is just like the reality sunk in, and I did share this with my Catholic friend as well because I was trying to think of positive things to say about the movie. Was that it's kind of incredible that crucifixion is something that we did as a species to each other, to who knows how many people. I mean, I'm willing to accept that Jesus was a real person, and that real person may have been actually crucified. I'm willing to accept that, without him, being Son of God and all that. And then that's still horrifying that people went through that kind of thing, and it's just
Absolutely.
that kind of cruelty is shocking. And I guess a thing to take from the movie is hopes that we don't do that anymore. I mean, I hope that doesn't really exist anymore, and that we've kind of moved on as a species. I guess it's an interesting question of, is it better that now we, just obliterate people with bombs? I don't know. Not quite a question for this video, but it does make you think a little bit. I think there is some carryover to Islam, because even if you're a Muslim, I think the Passion of the Christ could impact you, even if you don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and even if you've been taught he wasn't actually crucified. And that's because the guilt trip that's in Christianity can be found in Islam. It's that idea of God has given us everything, and yet we still disobey his commands, and we allow ourselves to be seduced by the devil and our selfish desires. So we should remind ourselves of how bad we often are, and how much we, petty, pathetic, lowly human beings owe to God. And I mean, I'm all for like a bit of humility, I think it's good to be a bit humble, especially when we think of like all like the devastation and destruction we've caused, in the world, like our ecosystem, climate change, whatever you want to call it. But I just feel like when you look at humans in this way, that, we should be so grateful, and we're just sinners, it just really demeans us as human beings and everything that we have done. I mean, sure, there's a lot of suffering in the world, sure, there's wars and stuff still, but think of all the amazing things that we've done, and like doing it for each other. Like, people complain about how there's no healthcare or like limited healthcare. Isn't it amazing that for us in Canada we do get some level of free healthcare?
It is amazing.
That you could get into like a horrible accident, and there's this whole system of people, like this network of people that will take you to the hospital, doctors who will treat you,
and you don't have to pay hundreds of $1,000s when you're out.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's just one example. So I don't like it for that reason. Is what these religions basically do is they assign all our good to God, who's pure and complete. As for us, we're like tainted and incomplete.
Like, I mean, I'm pretty pessimistic, as we know. So I do think that the human race just sucks.
The human race just sucks.
It does.
Do you think we just inherently suck and don't deserve to live?
Yes.
Maybe you should still be Christian then.
But I don't want to guilt trip anyone into thinking that. I just That's what I believe.
Hmm. Aside from my problem with the movie's message, I actually thought it was really well made for what it is, for what it's trying to do anyway. It gives you a little bit of the
Yeah,
backstory, maybe not enough for someone who's not a believer like me. Although I have heard some Christians say that it will just impact anyone. And that's kind of what I wanted to just end off with is, and you kind of already addressed this, is that I think that you can only get something impactful from this movie if you already believe the impactful thing in it, or that you're just looking for something, like you're lost and you're looking for meaning, and then you find this thing, like this Passion of the Christ, the story of Jesus, and then you think, okay, this is the thing that's going to give my life meaning.
absolutely. I do think that a lot of people who don't know where they're going in life need something to believe in. They could watch it and they could be like, wow, this really resonates with me. But the average person who doesn't really know anything about it is just watching it because they were told to, kind of thing. I just don't think that it would really have that same impact. Like, it's uncomfortable, but it doesn't tell enough of a story to make someone believe, I feel. Like, it might get you curious and you might start researching things afterwards, but just the movie itself, I don't think is really going to turn anyone all that Christian.
I guess I would recommend watching it if you're interested in just seeing it as like a, cultural phenomenon, kind of the same way that, oh, you got to see Avatar because everyone saw Avatar, or
Yeah, like, I mean,
everyone saw Titanic.
watch him when he's being angsty Jesus in the beginning. Well, he's gorgeous as angsty Jesus. But
Jim Caviezel, the actor.
Yep.
I thought he was pretty good too, actually. Did you know that the actor was actually struck by lightning when he made the movie?
No.
Maybe that was a message from God to not make the movie. I don't know.
Another thing is, what language is it in again?
Aramaic.
So, because it's in Aramaic, I feel like you have to pay attention that much more because you are reading all of the subtitles and it gets you more involved with the movie just because you pay such close attention.
As opposed to if it was just, in English, and then you can kind of just be doing your dishes in another room or be on your phone.
But like this way, you have to watch, you have to see everything. Otherwise, you're going to miss part of the dialogue.
Do you think it made it feel like more real because it was in subtitles, like something from like from like another era?
I feel like it did a bit, for sure, because yet again, it had that effect to really bring you into the whole movie, which is why if you were watching this in the theaters, I think it would have been a really, really intense experience for anyone who watched it there.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, in the end, I suppose after finishing watching it, I was also left with a lot of questions, just questions about why all the things in the universe had to end up this way for, Jesus to have to do that. It's kind of a strange concept to wrap your head around in a way, because so God created us and then we all started sinning, and so God's solution was to have a son that was also him, and have that son die and suffer to redeem us. I mean, there's so many questions that kind of come out of that. I don't even know where to start.
Well, you're forgetting about him flooding the entire earth to kill everyone. You're forgetting about
because of
him
our sins,
turning people into salt because they weren't obeying him. He keeps on giving us chances for some reason. I don't know why.
Maybe we're
like likes toying with us. We're the Sims.
We're the Sims, or maybe we're like we were just like in a toxic relationship, and even though God knows he's better off without us, he keeps on giving us a chance, but still, beats us and kills us every now and then.
Yeah.
Well, what problem was solved by God dying as Jesus. Because what was really lost or sacrificed? So Jesus is resurrected after 3 days, and God is all powerful. So it's really strange.
Yeah, don't ask me, because this is why I would be not Christian anymore. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
And that's
And
without going into the whole, free will thing of, do we actually have free will to sin or
yeah,
not sin if God created everything? But again,
yeah,
not something the Passion of the Christ touches upon.
it's just a lot. It's a lot that doesn't add up, doesn't make sense.
And to cap this off, our doctor's assistant is going to leave us with a wonderful, inspiring biblical verse.
So this is from Deuteronomy 25, verses 11 to 12. If two men are fighting, and the wife of one of them comes to rescue her husband from this assailant, and she reaches out and seizes him by his private parts, you shall cut off her hand. Show her no pity.
Facts. All right. So there you go, everyone. I hope you implement that in your day-to-day life. And thank you so much again, Doctor's Assistant, for joining me for this discussion.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you for putting yourself through the Passion of the Christ as well. I'm Secular Spirit, and I'll be back with another video soon, and hopefully the Doctor's Assistant will also return. Bye, everyone.